Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Let's start off with some satellite imagery here. This is the day today on Thursday, and we can see the powerful cyclone that's kind of wrapping up here into parts of the upper Midwest right over Lake Superior. For those that were in the Corn Belt, this fast-moving front that did come through here today did bring some rainfall. For example, right around my house, I picked up about 0.4 of an inch as it came through. The good news about the speed of that front is it didn't really have a lot of time to put down a lot of very heavy rainfall to really prohibit a lot of field activity happening in this area after this front goes through. Another neat thing to notice on this satellite animation is just here in the southern part of the Central Valley of California, the San Joaquin Valley. I just thought it was kind of neat to pick up on the fog that was there this morning. You can see it kind of eroding throughout the day today. Now looking at this, just to show you this, the system as it comes through is really knocking those temperatures back pretty quickly here. We're seeing temperature changes in the 10 to 20 degree range. We do expect a lot of this cold air to get let out in this direction over the next few days here, bringing in a pretty cold weekend for much of the east and southeast and through the Midwest, while the west actually goes back on a warming trend. I'll show you that in a few moments here. But as it stands, we do have a pretty active all hazards weather map, including starting from the west, some strong onshore flow giving us a flooding corridor here in parts of the Willamette Valley, getting up to the I-5 corridor around Seattle and the Cascades. We still have a winter weather advisory out for this part of Montana. Most of these are wind advisories, wind warnings. This is red flag warning, but the dark red you see right here, that's actually a blizzard warning. And we've got winter weather advisory, right in through here. Winter storm warning here. And so this system is really going to pack a punch. And in a few moments, I want to talk to you about what I'm expecting in terms of the winds, and also talk a little bit about what to look out for in terms of the snowfall. But I want to broaden this out to a longer range discussion first tonight. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is that system. So as we look here, we can see that that low is really cranked up here. And so we're getting gusts in the plains that'll be in the 30 to 60 mile an hour range. And those stronger winds are going to continue to wrap up. But the thing about this low that you see here is that the upper level low, the one at the jet stream level, is kind of vertically stacked over it. So the system will weaken. But coming across the lakes today, incredibly strong winds. Now, just taking a look here at the wind pattern across North America, I'd like to just zoom out and flip around a little bit and show you another very important place where we're watching these winds carefully. It's over here in the tropics on the equatorial Pacific region, and these are our trade winds. And what's going on right now is that our trade winds are relatively strong right in through this area. And that is what creates the colder water that shows up here, which we of course call La Nina. And it's the strength of these trade winds and their transition to above normal activity, to near normal activity, to below normal activity that's important. Now, if I just kind of keep working this around, what's most important about this flow is when the stronger winds get to about here. Can you see how over this region we have weaker winds, and over here there's even some winds coming out of the west near the surface? Now, why I stress that is because of this graphic. I show these to you a lot, but I wanted to give you the physical evidence of what you're looking at here. This would be the 11th today, Veterans Day, all the way through the 26th. So that's time on the y-axis. And as you look right here, these warm colors represent where those winds coming out of the Indian Ocean are coming out of the west like this, or at least are very slow here. Because normally in the trade wind region, they come out of the east. Where they're stronger than normal is here. And why I bring this up is this is the nose of the stronger trade winds that are associated with La Nina. And where they meet is right in through there. And that sits right on top of phase 5. Now, we just need to understand what that means, because if you notice, the forecast for at least the next 15 days is very consistent in terms of the placement of where these winds from the east and these from the west are going to meet. And that's going to give us a lot of rising motion right in this particular area. Now, this is something I stressed on Monday, but I want to bring it up to you again. Because as we look out there and we see the cooler water in place because of those winds, all right, and the winds coming in like this and over like that, and the rising motion in this particular area, it's going to give us a very distinct look for what's going on with our La Nina and what's going on with the MJO. Now, just to let you know, we have seen this for a while now. So see this blue that I'm circling in here? That would represent where we have the strongest trade winds. And you see the warm colors over here? That would represent where we have those stronger, almost westerly winds near the surface. So I'm just showing you, this has been a consistent picture for the last month, and I'm trying to make a case for why it's not going to change very much. Because as you look here at where the MJO is, it's spent a lot of time in phase 5. It was here in October, it tried to get out, and came right back and is currently sitting in here. And all these lines you see here, this is the forecast. And do you notice how we don't really see the MJO leaving kind of this territory through the next, well, this goes all the way out to the 12th. This is a 30-day forecast. So what that means is the correlation between getting stuck over in phase 5, or primarily in phase 5, shows us that this might be the typical flow pattern of the atmosphere we should expect. So take a look at this very carefully. I'm going to label these troughs first. Gulf of Alaska, East Coast, Europe. All right, you do see there's one over here, kind of just north of Japan too. But there's ridges tucked away, kind of a softer ridge. I don't know if that's a good term or not, but this ridge here will build and fade repeatedly, right in this position. And there's one out in the open Atlantic as well. We need to be talking very soon about what's going over the Arctic, because that's going to start to become a major influencer of this pattern. Now just keep your eye on this, because the jet stream's got to do something like this. And when you get jet stream flow like that, this tends to run over the mountains, produce systems that run along the US-Canada border that then dive into the eastern Great Lakes and deepen out. So the colder air will be here on the eastern side of the country. The warmer air will rebound at times in the west, but I don't expect the activity to slow down in the Pacific Northwest. The problem is this is a drier pattern for California, for Texas. That's where it's going to be drier. And so just thinking about that, I'm going to stretch it out longer term, because I'm going to come back to that idea in just a few moments. And I want to remind you of what this particular setup is likely going to mean as we move forward. Because I showed you this last time, right? This December, January, February seasonal outlook. And those were the regions we were concerned about seeing as drier. Same thing for the southeast. But if this pattern continues with that La Nina through at least the middle of winter, the Northwest is wet. There's an active storm track along the US-Canada border. There's an active storm track that develops in the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, maybe coming out of Arkansas. And so we're just providing additional support for some of the things we had just seen. Now, where I'm taking all of this is, if that La Nina is going to dominate, especially the front half of our winter, when does it stop doing that? Well, I need you to remember something. When you look at these ocean temperatures, what causes the cooler water here, and we're going to talk about this cool water in a moment, what causes this is those stronger trade winds. The moment the trade winds start to fade, the ocean temperatures don't fade immediately. They take time. So when you look out here, oops, let's find that again. There it is. And you see that this La Nina likely reaches a peak in ocean temperature around January. We may see the trade winds slacken off in early January, and the ocean temperatures begin to warm up from January through March. Now, what can end up happening here is that even though the ocean temperatures are still on the cool side, the atmosphere may go over to something maybe resembling the opposite. And I want to explain to you what I mean by the opposite here in just a few moments. But before I do that, I want to get to another point. We see that the longer range forecast for next summer into next fall is to possibly have these ocean temperatures approaching, well, El Nino status, which means we would end up developing very weak trade winds, practically even at times getting westerly wind bursts. And that's what I really want to dive into here at the beginning, okay? That's the setup. I went to one of my favorite websites. I've showed it to you before, Climate at a Glance. I picked out a region. The region is the primary corn and soybean belt. I know I have people all over the world that watch this video, but many of you are right here in the Midwest where I live. And I reconstructed a 3-month time series, June, July, and August, of precipitation going back to 1970. All right, so you can actually see that during summer we've been getting wetter to the tune of about 2 inches. That would be the difference between the 70s and the 2020s. Now what I did was down here I ranked them according to the driest, and for many of us in the corn and soybean belt, there's some heavy hitting years in this top 10 list. You can see it: 12, 88, 76, 83. What I wanted to know about that, though, was when we get into these really dry summers, is there anything about the transition from El Nino to La Nina or La Nina to El Nino that we should discuss? So take a look at what I made here. In January, of those very dry summers, generally speaking, there was cold water on the West Coast, cold water coming off the Baja, and colder water here. So we're only going to look at the Pacific in this example today. What I wanted to know was, what did it look like by the time we got into July? And this remained. But we started to see warming already taking place here. Now, why I stress that, now I want you to see something before I make the main point. My color bar goes from 1 to -1. And why I stress this is because of 2 things. One, we've got this cold water here and here. And if it lasts through winter and into spring and summer. Despite La Nina fading, I could get concerned about summer drought issues in the Midwest. Now, let me tell you something. If these waters warm back up, though, that forecast is gone. It's off the table, not a chance, because we'd have a much more active jet stream pattern across North America. But as we look out there, the long-range European only goes out to March, April, and May. And during that time period, the La Nina fades south. See the warmer water showing up here? But there's still some cooler water in place. And the thing I want you all, I'm going to invite you to watch with me, is to see if this cool water hangs around for a while. Because if it does, I'm just going to question what that late spring and early summer pattern may look like. Now, let's play a different game with this. Let's say that it fades fast. If it fades fast, we could get a shift midwinter in the pattern. And that midwinter shift would be corrective of a map like the one you see here. You see, this shows the last 30 days in terms of the percent of normal precipitation, and I showed it to you on Monday. And I noticed that this area and this area have been dry, despite some of the storms we saw early in the week in the Red River Valley of the South, and the storms quickly moving today across parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley over toward the southeast. This is still an area that's dry. And we ask why it's so dry. Well, we have yet to develop a strong subtropical jet this year. It's just not been there. I went out and I found those years, October, November, where we did have a really strong subtropical jet, and you can see what happened. The winds were really fast coming off of Japan, and then they picked up right in here again. See that? There's kind of two components to the jet stream flow. The subtropical component here, the polar jet there. Now notice, in those Octobers and Novembers, when we had a strong subtropical component, the jet stream ran up over the top of the Pacific Northwest. What have we had this year in October and so far through November? Watch, I'll change the video, but it'll look at the same map. Here we go. Or excuse me, change the image. So here's those strong subtropical years, subtropical jet years. Here's what we've got this year. All the high momentum has been here. And it's been pouring into troughs that cut into the northwest. And this flow has been much weaker than normal. Look at it here. Ready? And if I go back, that would be strong. So that means this jet stream pattern just hasn't given us a strong subtropical component yet. And there's two things that I think we should learn about that. That's going to keep the Northwest wet. That's going to keep an active storm track along the U.S.-Canada border. That's what we got today. This is the deep trough that's curling up, providing that outstanding upper level divergence right here that's giving us that deep low. This is the upper level low, though, that's going to sit over the top of it by the time we get into early tomorrow morning on Friday, stacking this whole thing up. But that polar jet is there and strong, with no hint of a subtropical component to the jet stream at all. So why I'm telling you this is because if we see the La Nina fading by by midwinter, this will be the region I expect to take over and become much more active. That often leads to a very stormy and severe early season in the south and could give us risk next year, midsummer, for possibly some drought concerns if this area here stays cold. That's the story I wanted to share with you today at the beginning. Now, let's get back into what we're concerned about. It's this big cyclone that's wrapping itself up over Lake Superior. This is this afternoon, on Thursday afternoon, the high-res NAM. We can see that through tomorrow morning. This is Friday morning, getting out here to Friday midday. We're going to watch snow showers curl around the backside of this. And where you see these isobars, the spacing really tight together, that would indicate where we're going to see the strongest winds. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest continues to get some stronger onshore flow as the main upper level front clears the east coast and the cold air comes wrapping in behind this, and that is certainly what it's going to do. So going from Friday evening, look at the scattered snow showers here, getting into this part of the Corn Belt in the Midwest, into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday evening, there's another very quick hitting system that comes through and delivers a bit more snow right into this area. But to see that, I'd like to flip over to our multi-model analysis to show you that both the GFS and the European have locked in on this. So you've seen the first cyclone curl up in the day on Friday over Lake Superior. It's going to slowly move by Friday night to Saturday morning. Here we are Saturday morning into Ontario and Quebec. And after that, some scattered snow showers on the backside. The next wave in the jet stream flow is right here in both models. And it comes out on Saturday. This is Saturday noon, Saturday at 6 p.m., and Saturday night, getting into Sunday morning. And that could just deliver another round of snow coming right through this part of Minnesota into Wisconsin. We'll look at snowfall totals in just a second. As we play this out now to Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening, that one goes through the Great Lakes. We're going to get some lake effect snow out of this. We're going to get some more wet weather in the northern part of the Ohio River Valley, getting to the eastern Great Lakes. And then behind that, we get a little bit of a calm down into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Tuesday and Wednesday next week, there's going to be a low that comes out of through the Canadian Prairie. And you can see here that the GFS has got this system much more quickly advancing as it normally does, while the European is a bit slower in the development. In either case, they both produce snow across parts of the Canadian Prairie, but that's that northern U.S., that U.S.-Canada border storm track I mentioned to you. Now, what ends up happening in the models once we get out to next Wednesday night into Thursday morning is that there's going to be higher atmospheric pressure extending right in through here. You can see it in both models. There's a deep low. The European has it over Ontario. The GFS has it over this part of Quebec. And what ends up occurring here is in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, we get what we call deformation in the flow. So the flow about a mile and a half above our heads is doing that and this. So we end up developing right in this area a frontal boundary. And the European model out there a week from the run I'm using here is putting it, the GFS is putting it some very wet weather in through here. The European model, while it still has that same setup, is farther to the south of the Ohio River Valley. Okay, you'll see the difference in a second. But they both tend to produce another round of precip out there on like the 19th that then kind of clears through the Mid-South and gets over toward the Appalachian Mountains throughout the day on the 19th into the 20th. So that gets us out there pretty far. Let's now take a moment and analyze the snow side of this. European model first. We're looking here at snowpack building up through this weekend. And why don't we just stop this once we get out to about a 5-day forecast. There we go. So this gets us all the way to Tuesday morning. Now my color bar, remember, 4 inches starts right about there. So the European model's got quite a bit of snow coming into this area. Lake effect on the backside and snow in the interior at higher elevation in the northeast. The heaviest snow is going to be right into this area where we'll have blizzard strength winds as well. All right. That's the European. Let's now see what the GFS has to say. We'll just take this out all the way out to 5 days. So we'll stop it at 120 hours. There we go. You actually get a pretty similar setup here. If I could say there's a difference, it's primarily over Michigan and southern Wisconsin, and also in parts of the northeast where the GFS is much more aggressive on the snow. But that's what we've got. That's our model, multi-model analysis. Now from here, I want to do a comparison between the models and just show you that this big stripe that you see right here is all the way out there next Thursday. That's when the GFS sets up that heavy rain boundary here, whereas the European has it farther to the south and east. The European is wetter with the second system that's coming through the Canadian Prairie, but the GFS is really pushing the strong onshore flow in the Pacific Northwest versus the European taking it into British Columbia. I think those are some of the bigger differences that I'm seeing right now in the model runs. Okay, from there, watch this pattern. This is day 10. Now, do you remember what I showed you earlier? Come back to this. If the MJO is in phase 5, trough, trough, trough. Okay? And if we come back to it, there we go. Look, trough, trough, trough. This is very much falling in line with a teleconnection with the MJO. And as we play this forward, we continue to see a lot of that going out there into week 2. So with the jet stream flow doing something like this, there's a lot of convergence in the midsection of the country. There's probably going to be drier weather and warmer weather in the west and colder weather, unsettled weather as you get off the east coast. And sure enough, if we look out there into the week 2 time period, we do see a little bit drier weather in the west, although I think this is a little too dry. We see near normal precipitation for late November in the midsection of the country. But as that trough kind of rounds the base, there could be an area in through here that gets increased precipitation excuse me, into the northeast as we play out fully into week 2. Now, before we do the long range, the next 4 weeks, let's now go take a look at those temperatures. Let's do max temperatures first here. What we're going to watch is we already saw Thursday's highs. There's Friday, the cold air coming in behind this, getting into Saturday's highs and Sunday. So you can already see the warm up with the ridge redeveloping in the west, the deeper trough over the east, keeping things cold. But the pattern is open and unblocked and moving. So by Monday into Tuesday, the high plains recover in the 60s and 70s. And we see here that throughout much of the Midwest, back up into the low 50s. And we've got a warm kind of path of air kind of cutting through the midsection of the country. but it's followed by another shot at cooler air. This pattern is going to stay open and keep moving. What about those minimum temperatures? Well, what I want to focus in on here is where do we get that freezing line? There's Friday, getting into Saturday. Now we see it getting all the way down here into parts of the Mid-South, the Red River Valley of the South. And by Sunday, it's going to possibly get into parts of central Alabama, northern Georgia, northern Mississippi, get some cold air down here. But it moderates pretty quickly early next week. So there's Tuesday getting into Wednesday. All right. Bigger picture stuff. This is now the day 5 through 10 time period. And what I'm really interested in is seeing the cooler air that's setting up in place here. That is a source region on the eastern side of the Rockies that can be let out and head on down across the Midwest into the east and southeast. And that's day 5 through 10, and day 10 through 15 we see that starting to happen. So this would be basically leading us through Thanksgiving. A warm up in the Great Basin, but a lot of cooler air that's going to be in place here to finish the month. Now where do we go beyond that? Well, I'm going to show you two areas as we finish this up. First, here's the temperature pattern starting with that week of Thanksgiving and moving to the end of the month, getting into December. All right, so that's the last week of the month, getting into the first week of December. The models keep bringing in warmer than average conditions into the midsection of the country, but keep a lot of cooler air or near normal temperature air from the Great Lakes and upper Midwest all the way to the east. But it stays in kind of a pattern that fluctuates as we go through the beginning of December and then toward the middle and end of December. In fact, I'll just stop this out there on Christmas. You see the pattern kind of opening up and closing off, and opens up and closes off. That's what happens when you resist blocking in the Pacific jet. The other thing about this pattern is, I'll come back to something mentioned earlier, we don't have that strong subtropical component. So look, the Sierra Nevada, Southern California, this region, here and here are showing up drier, whereas the Northwest, the Canadian Prairie, getting into the Great Lakes, that's where our more active storm track is going to sit. So the end of this month to the 25th of December, we're seeing more activity in the northern half of the country because of the lack of the strong subtropical jet. And the last thing I want to mention to you all is I want to go over to Europe and I want to take a look at the temperature pattern from now through Christmas. And if we just look, we got some pretty cold air in place there during this time period. We're going to favor more cold air than normal. And if we continue to see cooler air in the eastern part of the United States and we see cooler conditions in Europe as we begin winter, there's just going to be increased heating demand. I just want to keep you aware of some of those bigger things we're watching. Okay, I'm going to stop this one here. We'll talk to you again early next week. Until then, have a good rest of your week and weekend. Thank you.